I'm Ted Wetzel, and I'm here today with Tom Haidt. Tom and I have become friends in kind of an odd way. Tom and I are somewhat opposites. Tom considers himself conservative. I consider myself middle, but I lean towards the left in the liberal category on several categories. What's kind of odd about it, I think, is that to me anyway, it feels like Tom and I could be like pretty far apart. But the more we talk, we end up being like so close together, and we want to demonstrate that for you today in this diagram. And we think it could actually possibly be groundbreaking from the standpoint of appreciating conservative and liberal together to make a whole or something more whole.
When people look at the diagram, it's a little bit different than the typical diagram that has a bar that's horizontal, and on the left is the political left and on the right is the political right. What's I think kind of unique about it is that it's a circle. I think we did add some unique qualities to what we're going to be discussing today, but there are aspects that have been covered by other people. The circle concept is something I actually learned when I was in middle school, or actually in high school. So there are certainly aspects that other people have investigated, but I think that we've added some unique things that we will get to later in the conversation.
Folks, we're going to introduce you to this circle concept, and the method that we're going to use is we're actually going to build this model piece by piece. So instead of like showing you the complete model, we're gonna add a piece here, add a piece there, and so this takes about 10 different slides to go through to build the whole picture. So bear with us.
It really makes sense that you put those political perspectives, those political ideologies that are total control next to each other. So on the circle at the top, you have communists on one side and fascists on the other. And although they may come to their statism from a different perspective, they ultimately are statists. The state is supreme. When you look at, and if you go down to the bottom of the circle, that's where you have liberals, that's where you have conservatives, and at the very bottom, that's where you have what I would call the extreme libertarians, those who believe basically in no government or close to anarchy.
And so when Tom, you explained this to me, or started with this basic circle, it's one of those, you had me at hello, it's like, why wasn't I paying attention in high school when you were paying attention? Or maybe it wasn't explained to me, but it's like, wow, tell me more. I want to learn more about this.
We continue our conversation. We definitely added some unique things. They may not be unique. Other people may have thought along these lines, but they certainly were unique to us. We didn't, it's not as though we're plagiarizing work that had been done. We did take this basic concept and we expanded it quite a bit.
Yeah. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're not quite sure who those giants were, but we're trying to give them credit. We simply here added the left side of the curve becomes more liberal, the right side of the curve becomes more conservative, and we added, like Tom had already mentioned, libertarian at the very bottom of the circle.
At the top of the circle, you have what I would call statists. That's the communist and the fascist. Those people who believe in the supremacy of the state. And at the bottom of the circle, you really get to the point where you're almost bordering on and including anarchy. And the libertarians, I believe, are, they definitely tend towards what I would regard as anarchy, is people live their lives without any input from government. There really is no government. And so the libertarian really does cut both ways. If people were virtuous, from a conservative perspective, if people were 100% virtuous, you would not need government.
We think many, many, many viewpoints can fall inside of this circle model. So we're not trying to shove this down anybody's throat. We're just trying to, shall we say, open the window and let this viewpoint in. That's all. we're starting to fill out these numbered items, which basically are 7 numbered items. And these 7 numbered items, I believe Tom and I would both give credit largely to Johnathan Haidt. Please look up his books. He has several. One of them is The Righteous Mind, which talks about how the left and the right get attached to their views, and some of the logic and reasoning behind why we have such a hard time letting go of our views.
Sure. So Johnathan Haidt is a very interesting person, because I would regard you and Johnathan Haidt as liberals. And so in this definition of liberal, there's a fair amount actually in common with conservative. But there's a liberal loves America, loves freedom of speech, loves capitalism, but which are all things that a conservative would agree with as well. Where liberals and conservatives really start to diverge is that a liberal believes that the government can be used for good, and a conservative is more skeptical that government can do something for good. We would tend to believe that it's people in the local community helping people to actually elevate people from their current state to hopefully a higher state.
So here we start with number 1, which is so in common between conservatives and liberals that we don't even differentiate, and that's being worshipers, shall I say, of liberty. That we all have freedom. As my friend Tom just commented, we do see differences in liberty, and we're going to get to that.
But liberty from a more conservative perspective really entails individual rights, individual the Constitution and things along those lines. I think that's probably an overlap, but it is truly the handmaiding, I think, of liberty is being what's the word? It's basically being responsible for yourself, but there's a more concise term that I just can't pull out of my head at the moment. The only way you can truly have liberty is to have the virtues, and that is, respecting other people. It's tolerance of other people. It's making sure you do your best and take care of yourself, that you look out for your neighbor when they need a helping hand. And those are the things that need to be in place for limited government, right?
Fairness. On the left, that is largely viewed as equal opportunity, and on the conservative side, it's largely viewed as reap what you sow. Now, a cautionary tale here. We're limited with space here. Johnathan Haidt, for these 7 items, wrote a 200 or 300 page book. So we're obviously boiling this down. The thing that I would like to point out about, as Tom and I climb this little ladder from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, is to the listeners to ask themselves, can you see a point where, boy, either side is right, given the right situation or the right circumstance?
Haidt describes the conservative fairness as karma, right? You get what you deserve.
Karma, right?
You reap what you sow, and that's exactly what you have.
Yep, great. caring, and basically liberal people tend to care about different things than conservative people do. And for liberal people, it's more of concern for the less fortunate, or what looks like concern for the less fortunate. And for conservative people, it's like, I care, but we all have to get through the school of hard knocks.
That conservatives definitely care for the less fortunate as well. But ultimately, we do think that people have the responsibility to take care of themselves, and that there is more of an expectation of the individual on the conservative side to actually fulfill their obligations of living and being part of society.
Or is then loyalty. And so the liberal side would be, God bless the world, and there is abundance, so we can all figure out how to share in that abundance. And for the conservative side is more of, hey, charity begins at home. God bless America, and let's be sure that we're taking care of our own.
Whether or not something is fair, you don't really see the value of sometimes people sucking it up or doing something that is not 100% fair to them, but it actually allows the group to do better. So self-sacrifice, there's less of that concept on the left. To your family, it's loyalty to your community, it's loyalty to your country, and trying to do things that that you invest time and effort into in order to make your country a better place. And sometimes you probably give it the benefit of the doubt, and other times you don't. But loyalty allows you to continue to be a part of something, even when you don't necessarily agree with everything 100% of the time.
Okay, so rounding out the Johnathan Haidt items that he identifies as basically, how to help describe how liberals think and act differently than conservatives think and act. We're going to go through 5, 6, and 7 here.
The conservative believes that individuals should be raised with self-control, right? People should control their worst instincts, right? So that's where the loyalty and the authority come in, that people should have their own self-restraints to prevent them from doing things that harm other people, right? And authority should help reinforce those virtues, is what I would refer to them as self-control and self-regulation. Whereas on the liberal side, you might start to think, well, gosh, you're keeping people from quote unquote being real. And so you're infringing on people's self-expression and things like that. So authority can be looked at perhaps as conformity, but being used for conformity. But in the end, if we do not have self-control, then the only thing that can allow a society to exist would be a police state, a very strong government, central government that tells people what to do and how to act. On the liberal side, there's more of a broader perspective that people should quote unquote be authentic to themselves, and that sometimes these self-regulation and self-control is stifling to the individual.
So as you're describing that, I'm thinking to myself, hey, let's jump to number 7, because these are all connected, by the way. And I found myself being drawn to a strong connection as you were talking between 5 and 7. So purity is, again, I think this is the term that Johnathan Haidt uses. Another word that he might use is sanctity, I think, in this case.
Yep, I think the word is sanctity.
Yeah. So that would be, I guess, a way of saying, what do the liberals hold as sacred and what do the conservatives hold as sacred? And you just got done talking about that a little bit, and I'm just going to repeat it. that on the liberal side, as far as purity or sanctity goes, liberals value exploration and self-expression. And on the other side, conservatives value tradition and self-control. For me personally, Ted, I value both of these, you know, and there's a time for every season is what I think to myself.
When it comes to oppression, government has the ability to do a number of things that a private corporation cannot do, right? Government actually has the right to use legal force, and they also have the right of taxation. So those are two things that a business cannot do. And so when you look at the infringement on the individual, in a conservative's mind, government is the biggest threat. Unfortunately, there are people born in every generation who want to rule over other people.
Ouch. Right.
And so they want to accumulate power. They want to accumulate control over the masses. When you look at liberals and they're concerned about oppression, they do believe that government, they don't fear government as much. They see government as being the an actually useful tool that keeps things fair. You have options, but there's only one government, right? And that one government is everywhere, and they have the ability that the threat of large government far outweighs the threat of what business can do. And that's the point, the differentiation between a conservative perspective and a more liberal perspective.
Tom and I decided to include this list from Johnathan Haidt, not to rule people out or to exclude people, but to help us all appreciate are important. And there's a spectrum out there for each one of these. And we would prefer to appreciate and understand this spectrum rather than exclude people that we disagree with.
We wanted to make sure that we had as many of the perspectives covered as possible.
For those people who are unfamiliar, they might say, oh, look at, I guess I do lean right on this, or I lean left on that. And, just self-diagnose ourselves as how we lean. So here we just added this note to the bottom right corner and the bottom left corner that conservatives would often be concerned about regulating the body and liberating money and business. And on the opposite flip side, liberals become more concerned about liberating the body and often want to regulate money and business.
I actually think these are pretty important words that we've added here, and I think they help differentiate. So when you talk about the conservative wants to regulate the body, it tries to do things. Conservatives in general try to do things, in my opinion, that help reinforce the virtues. And so self-control is an important thing. Self-control probably is the central pillar of the virtues, in my opinion. And to liberate the money in the business, I think is important, and it weaves back into what I said earlier. But you want people to be creative. You want them to develop new services and products that people might want to buy. It's what, it allows us to progress. It allows human minds to be creative and to do different things. Shifting over to the liberal side of things, they do have more of a view of self liberation, right? And then to regulate the money and the business. Again, it's looking at government to be the final decision maker on what's fair and what's not. And if something's not fair, rather than taking it into your own hands, the discussion we're having is definitely below the dashed line, right? It's in the lower half of the circle. Mm-hmm. And so there are definitely things that are in common, though they're not the same, right? They're not the same perspective. I think we could not have the same conversation above the line. There's probably a little bit more agreement on 2, 3, 4, and there's probably some different disagreement on 5 as well. But 2 and 3 for sure. 4, there's probably a large overlap, but then 5, 6, and 7, we start to get more divergent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most of our angst and hand wringing and this focuses on 7 and 6, and as a people, just maybe for 2, 3, 4, and 5, we already have an appreciation for it could go either way. And voila, we start to identify the dashed line and the line that we hope not to cross. For the conservative in me, I like the idea of meritocracy. That is that through self-control and through reaping what I sow, I can achieve more. And so on the right, on the conservative side, we'd like everyone, really deep down, we'd like everyone to achieve more. And the liberal in me wants to be sure that everyone has equal opportunity to achieve what they can be. We can't force people we can't force people to be something they don't want to be. But we can give them opportunity, and it does seem like in America, we do have agreement on providing equal opportunity.
All the things that we have done with the model, these concepts we added here probably are the most insightful, at least that we have come up with. Other things that we have done have been inspired by people who've come before us. And again, there may be somebody out there who's developed essentially the same model as we have. Mm-hmm. We're just not aware of it. Between where democracy and a republic can exist, which is more or less below the dashed line, and where you really started getting to statism, which is above the dashed line, the boundaries we identified of meritocracy and inequality and group outcome and versus group exclusion, I think that to me is the most insightful. When you cross that dotted line, you really are on the slope and on the glide path to going into a statist government realm.
If you're a listener, please don't feel like I hope we hope you don't feel overwhelmed. This is just part of learning about government and appreciating our government. What I am saying, I think Tom would agree, is that the whole tipping point of oligarchy is the power is definitely not with we the people. It's with strong individuals. I apologize. I'm really not in the know here, but I am familiar with what an oligarchy is, and that we have some of that going on in America right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And kind of, I'm not sure that I would include Comcast on the right. Comcast, I believe, owns NBC or CBS. So they definitely are, and as you suggested, the mainstream media certainly is not conservative. And so Comcast may not be a good example in large corporations, right? They certainly have their goals, and they will certainly use their influence to try to make the environment, the business environment, more suitable to them, right? Whether that's something in regulation, whether it's creating a barrier for other companies to enter. They certainly are predatory. There's no two ways about it.
What I tell myself is that in America, oligarchical power mostly revolves around money.
Perhaps another way of looking at it is it's a more fluid aristocracy, right? Aristocracy in the old form was based on birth, right? You Duke have a kid that his oldest son would eventually become the Duke of whatever realm he was from.
Yeah.
Oligarchy, I guess, in a way, is more based on merit, because if you make stupid decisions and you lose your wealth, you lose your oligarchy status. And if you are smart, no matter what your origins, and you earn a lot of money and or you're whatever, you accumulate power, then you can join that branch. But it's not hereditary. So there definitely is an oligarchy is a non-hereditary aristocracy. So fascism really is based on ethnicity, typically, or perhaps nationality, broader sense, but certainly ethnicity is what it has been most closely associated with. So it's the unification, it's ethnic purity, as you have written there. It's some sort of race-based purity. Whereas the leftists, I'm sure most people are familiar with the term, workers of the world unite. The only thing you have to lose are your chains, right? So it's the left is talks about class. It's less ethnically. It's not ethnically focused per se, but it's based on worker. The worker in England and a worker in Thailand and a worker in Mexico have more in common with themselves, as the communist perspective, than amongst themselves than they do with a fellow Mexican, a fellow Englishman, or I forget what the third country I use as the example. But in the end, they basically believe the same thing.
I apologize for the listeners. The slides got out of order for me, and we don't have anything to say about slide 8. On this slide, we added the oligarchy, and then from there we added this area of constitutional monarchy, authoritarianism, feudalism, aristocracy, complete monarchy, dictatorship, and absolute monarchy.
So we added the scale on the left to help bring in the different types of government in a hopefully a clearer way. So the scale does tie to going from the bottom of the circle to the top of the circle, and at the very bottom we showed the anarchy that we talked about earlier. And that's where really, it's what I would regard anyway as the furthest libertarian view, that everybody does what they want, everybody's free to do what they want, there is no government. And then as you start moving up, you have what I would call true democracy, and that's where you have a government where everybody votes on everything. And that's, ultimately that proves out to be not very practical. More or less, you think of true democracy, you go back to Athens. And again, people, there was a vote. They cast lots. They had, I think a white stone was yes and a black stone was no. And you put your stone in, they counted the stones, and whoever won carried the day. But ultimately, as civilizations got bigger, it became impractical to have everybody vote on everything. And that's where the concept of merging democracy with representative perspectives came into being, whereas people elect the representatives, and the representatives get down into the nitty-gritty to representative democracy towards the middle, which is where I would regard the United States of America. And then as you move up, you get into more socialist countries where government has more authority, and the individual voter and the individual has less and less. Then you transition into the realm of really what I would call the government singularity. And whether it's an absolute monarch or a dictatorship or authoritarian or whatever, it's a government, a form of government where power is basically absolute. It is a small group of people who wields that power, and the people basically are subjects, whether they're called comrade or subject to the crown or something else. They in essence are subjects, and they are as subject to the whims of what the government does without having any say. It tells you where really the sweet spot is from if you believe in democracy, representative democracy, and people, we the people. It does show you the sweet spot.
It's the blue zone that basically is democracy, and using Tom's word, we're trying to get the sweet spot of that, which is what we think is the American form of representative democracy or a republic. Right.
You also kind of look at it as I don't know if you golf or not, but it's the sweet spot on the club. Whereas if you hit the ball with the anarchy part of it, you shank it, and if you hit the government singularity portion with it and hit the ball, you end up slicing it. Yeah. So you definitely want to hit the sweet spot.
Good, thanks. At the very top left, we added a comment, which was, again, a piece of fruit that dropped from the tree of you and I discussing, because we discovered that, boy, from a 30,000 foot view, you and I agree on a lot of stuff. But life is lived with the boots on the ground or below 100 feet. And so there's a lot of opportunities to disagree in real life.
Right, as another way of saying it, the devil's in the details. Yeah, no, I think that's America truly is in the sweetest part of that vertical bar graph, right? Yeah. And so I think that you have covered it well, and it's true that everything's a balance, right? But it's an amalgam, right? You have one person who's in charge of the executive branch. You have the judicial. So it's everything is a balance. Sometimes it's messy, but ultimately, if you want to prevent a slide towards the top of the circle where you have absolute power, you have to divide power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right? Lord Acton said that, and we have the best mechanism in place, in my opinion, to prevent that consolidation of power and tyranny and dictatorship. And so if we are willing to defend it, we have the sweet spot. But it takes defense. It takes action. It takes people proactively. Every generation produces those people that want to control things. I don't get it. I would love my life to be revolving around learning and exercising, eating well, and just and traveling, a whole bunch of other things that I would love to do if I didn't feel an obligation to try to preserve America. But this is clearly the calling of our time, is to, if we don't defend it now, it's going to go. I mean, I really believe that we are at a juncture, having half the country more or less conservative and half the country progressive. It's oil and water. It cannot mix. It's not a stable mixture.
Liberal for you is a perfectly acceptable word, and you, in your vocabulary, liberal is like not crossing a line, right?
Right. I make a distinction between liberals and progressives.
Right. That's what I was fishing for.
So even though in reality, liberals and conservatives really have a fair amount in common, because the progressives have been so successful at tar and feathering people on the conservative side as being those things, a liberal thinks, my God, I have more in common with a progressive than I do with a conservative, because I'm not homophobic, I'm not racist, I'm not anything, right? Think, my God, why in the world would I consider myself, working with conservatives when there are all these bad things? I certainly am progressive, and besides, progressive means improvement, right? It's elevation. It's doing the good thing. It's being good. Progressive is pro. From a liberal into the progressive realm is when you start to dictate equal outcomes.
Does the word conservative turn into a single word for you, like when it crosses over that meritocracy? I can't think of a word. I don't think there's a word. Would that next word, if the word below the line is conservative, is the word above the line fascist?
One could maybe, you look at loyalty and authority, and if you looked at loyalty as being loyal to your ethnicity, that could maybe considered in the realm of, you want the best bang for the buck, right? So if you're getting medical service, if you're getting somebody to work on your car, you want to go to somebody who's competent. Regardless, you prioritize competency over anything else.
Tom and I largely agree on is that whenever possible, as much as possible, try to drive decisions down to the local level. And then if you can't do it efficiently there, then maybe the state level. And if you can't do it efficiently there, then the federal level. And of course, there's other reasons beyond the scope of this discussion to consider federal, state, or local level. But in general, people want to be involved.
Yeah, no, I think I believe it was Thomas Jefferson who said words to the effect that the best government is the government that is closest to the people, and I think that's true. And ultimately, again, from a conservative perspective, what we need to do is get government back to doing what government does best, and that is it's really, yeah, it's a few basics, right? Prior to large government, it really was the community that took care of their own, right? The churches which still do, take care of the homeless and the poor to a large extent. But they also did a lot of help in helping families get by in raising kids and other aspects as well, that government programs have usurped that responsibility from the community and put it onto government. And so in my idealized future, it's people willingly taking care of other people and helping them along. And what that does is it creates a virtuous cycle, right? So the people who help actually are directly interacting with the people who need the help, right? So there's a bond there. Mm-hmm. The person who's giving the help sees the result of their effort, and the person who receives the help knows who gave it to them, right? Mm-hmm. The virtuous cycle is broken by government, because what government does is that service that hypothetically was given from one community member to another community member, now the government provides that service. The person who pays the taxes only sees the fact that they paid the tax, right? And they kind of resent it. Why are my taxes so high? Obligation between the person who received it and the person who gave it. They don't feel an obligation to do better. They think it's a birthright that government should take care of them, right? So that virtuous cycle is broken. We'll just let the benevolent dictator make all the decisions, and they'll make the great decisions, and we'll follow suit. Well, the problem is that you never get two benevolent dictators in a row.
As you had reminded me of with this silver bullet, idealistic, benevolent dictator wish that we all had, whenever we have that wish, we give away our liberty. We're giving away our power as people. It feels like such an easy, wonderful thing to wish for, but it just doesn't happen, and we give up our humanness, our liberty. I made up a new word.
Yeah, so what is that word?
It's
was it supposed to be controversial? No. Excess and conservial? Conserverall, right. What's the definition?
It's this middle zone. It's not liberal, it's not conservative, it's conserverall.
Oh, interesting. I don't know how you rebrand it. I don't know how you get people. I mean, I get the sense, certainly, where you wouldn't be talking to me, that we see a lot of things in common in that area.
Am I going to say that I want to cross over to the line and call myself a conservative? No, I've painted myself in a corner. I'm not going to just accept all of the things on the right side of the 2 through 7, And Tom, you have painted yourself into a similar corner on the conservative side. You'd never say I'm crossing over to be a liberal, Someone paid a pretty good sum of money to do some research on what would we call ourselves, And it was somewhat surprising, but the thing that people had energy around were the words "we the people."
Yeah, I mean that definitely that is good. How do you label that? I'm a we the people. Yeah, I'm a member of we the people. How do you brand yourself? How do you say, hi, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, I'm a whatever. I'm a we the people.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite work. I definitely get it. It's totally in the right realm, right? Because it reemphasizes the Constitution, individual rights, and freedom of speech, and all those things that we stand for. So it's totally right there, right. But it's a phrase, not a noun.
Agreed.
You need a noun.
So when I heard that research, I happened to be in Denver, Colorado for this conference, and they presented this research. And immediately after that, I was with people of color. And the people of color actually like it, but they take a little bit offense to it because the original We the People was white landowning males, So then we started talking about, well, what about We the People 2.0?
Yeah, you can say I'm a 2.0er.
Yeah, right. Then you can say you're a 2.0er.
Yeah. Yeah, that gives us the noun.
But I know that you and I are pondering things at a new level right now. So let's let that go too.